Good morning and good afternoon for those of you watching on the East Coast or elsewhere. This is the Design Thinking Show on Dojo Live. Today is Thursday, March 24th, 2022. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California. And joining me today is Daniel Raskin, who is the co-founder, CPO and CMO at Mperativ. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Grateful to be here.
So Daniel and I were just talking before the show how beautiful the weather here is in Southern California. He's just a little north of me, and we're probably going to get together on our motorcycles and go for a coffee. I know you are going to get together on your Vespa, but so not to make anybody jealous who might be on the East Coast that's really cold or snowing or raining, but we are enjoying a beautiful day. And we're going to have a great show today. We're going to talk about an interesting topic, but before we get into the topic, let's get to know our guest. Daniel, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and then we'll dig into what Mperativ does.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name is Daniel Raskin, and I at heart, I'm a product guy. So I grew up at, I'd like to say in the tech world at Sun Microsystems, where I grew up in the product world, building all kinds of infrastructure from identity to systems management to application servers and things like that. And, over the last couple of years, I consider myself now a Sun Microsystems refugee. But I also have been working in startups going from Series A or seed all the way to IPO in terms of building out that marketing infrastructure, the demand engine, running products, things like that, and kind of learning a lot about what goes into really building a scalable, repeatable business.
Fantastic. The company that got acquired by Enquarter, which created dojolive, one of the co-founders is Sun Microsystems, ex-refugee as well. So you're a good company. All right, let's talk about, I've heard the stories. Let's talk about Mperativ.
Yes.
What does the company do? What was like that aha moment? We have to do this. Tell us a little bit more about the company.
Yeah, so Mperativ was grown out of my own experiences and my co-founders' experiences, being in that kind of leadership team as a CMO or GM, and really dealing with all the struggles that go into how you actually build a scalable, repeatable demand engine that has clear handoffs from marketing to inside sales to sales, and has like a lot of detail in terms of understanding what goes into a successful business. And a lot of where Mperativ came from was our frustration of buying CRM tools, buying marketing automation tools, and being given these APIs where all of a sudden they're saying, now you go and build the data model. You figure out how to take time series data and take temporal snapshots for trends. You go and figure out how to build all the visualizations from it. You go and figure out, how to actually make sense of this data to determine what are the key ingredients that go into a successful business. And so we designed Mperativ from the standpoint of how to actually rethink what we call revenue marketing and rethink how you actually build the demand engine so that we can break down silos across marketing, sales, inside sales, customer success, and create a really fluid view of the business that you can look at from any angle.
That's interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what we learned today as we go through our questions. It's funny, as I'm listening to you, I'm reminded it's like someone it's like buying the wheels, the engine, and someone telling you, go ahead and put it together before you could ride it. That's not fun. Right?
You can't treat marketing ops and RevOps and sales ops and marketing and sales teams like developers. We're not. Right? We don't have data engineers on our team that know how to build data models and make sense of data. We don't want to be
play.
Yeah,
plug and play. We want plug and play. Okay, so let's see what we can learn today. We're going to talk about RevOps and revenue marketing, the emerging practices of unifying go-to-market operations. And the question that we're going to answer through our conversation today is, can a common language centered on revenue solve for the marketing credibility gap? So let's kick off the conversation today. We have 7 questions we're going to consider. And these questions are to highlight how your company is using design thinking and things like empathy and emotional intelligence and strategy and innovation and methodologies that you're doing to design great experiences for your end users, as well as great organizational structure. So the first question that I would like to ask in our effort to learn from you is, what methodologies were used to develop your mission and why?
Yeah. So the way we approached Imperative was, before we ever went and started building product, we started with interviews. We knew a lot of the pains from our own experiences and had a clear idea, subject matter experts, what we wanted to build, but we wanted to validate that not only with our experiences, but to cut across all the different executives and stakeholders that were working with marketing. So first and foremost was going out to CMOs, CROs, CFOs, CEOs, investors, sales ops people, just doing constant interviews with them. And the way we'd actually approach it was, we actually would build wireframes. So we went through and we wrote up our use cases, and we started wireframing out in a tool called Figma what the visualization would look like, what the application would look like. And we just kept on putting that in front of people. I'd say we did 50 to 100 interviews before we ever got seed funding, in hardening that visualization and what the product would actually look like. And it was a really critical thing because we, as I mentioned, we all came from Sun. So we knew how to build amazing infrastructure that could scale like crazy on the back end. But we knew our biggest weakness was that we didn't want to build technology that you could bend in any direction whatsoever to implement. We wanted to actually have an opinionated view for the customer that made their lives easier. So this emphasis on the front end was critical, and it also drove everything on the back end. It's the thing that drove how our CTO, Paul Bryan, who came from Salesforce and was doing Salesforce 360, thought through kind of how he would build the data model, how he would build the architecture. So very much from a visual standpoint, we approached this in terms of, let's go out to all these stakeholders and just continuously collect data. Once we actually got that and built the data model, then we started building product, and we got our seed funding, and it took us about a year to get the product off the ground.
So interesting approach. I'm curious to see what you guys learned from that, right? So you went with a sort of thought process or an idea, and then you kept validating, invalidating, researching, listening. Through that listening, did you get a sense of almost creating a community around what you're looking to do as well? And I'd be curious how you actually foster innovation amongst the participants, both inside and outside of the company, to create that community.
Yeah, so we did. We wanted people that were, you talk about emotional centric design, and what we were finding in the world of marketing was the key emotion that people were feeling was anger. And so we want people that were super passionate about how to actually reconstruct what the demand engine was, and to challenge assumptions. People that wanted to challenge the assumption and kind of change that effect of marketing going into executive meetings and starting to talk about key metrics like cost per MQL or cost per SAL and all these things where they sound great. It's like, oh my God, you're doing amazing. Have no idea what it means in terms of revenue, but it sounds good. So we kind of wanted to challenge assumptions. And one of the key assumptions that we had come out from all those interviews was that the CMO is 100% dependent upon what happens downstream. If inside sales isn't effective with the stuff that they feed it, they fail. If sales isn't effective with the stuff they feed it, they fail. Yet the metrics that all these different groups are looking at were completely different. So we realized very quickly from these interviews that we needed to standardize marketing on a common metric with everyone else, which was revenue and opportunities, and to find people that were really passionate about giving feedback to that in terms of how we actually keep on innovating and not getting caught in the old world thinking, but thinking ahead of, how does this make my life better? How can I use this?
That's fantastic. And, often when you ask people to give their thoughts and opinions, especially inside the organization, some have some bias or stigma that, okay, they already have a thought process or a point of view. They're just trying to validate it or have me supported, which is the furthest from the truth in most cases. You're just actually honestly trying to get some feedback, as you guys have shared. So I'm curious, how does the company design processes in support of encouraging participation? Because that's the key thing, right? It's having people participate actively and honestly. So what are some of the things you guys design or that you learned to design and replicate to support and encourage participation?
Yeah, I think because we're an early stage company, I mean, one of the things that we did was with all of our beta customers and now kind of our young customers that are using our platform, we always made sure to have weekly stand-ups with them where they could just give us feedback. And our whole goal in those meetings is to listen. And they may not be articulating what the right solution is, but it's understanding what's the frustration or the pain or the challenge that they're trying to face, and then going back to the team to think about how do we actually go back to them with some ideas or suggestions about how to make this better. So we continue to do that with all of our customers where we do a weekly stand-up. It's 30 minutes. If there's nothing that week to talk about, it doesn't happen. But if there are things to talk about, we'll go into it and we'll dig in. And not only talk about what their experience is using the product right now and how it's helping them or how it's needs to be enhanced, but also showing them where we're headed. So, we're still focused on trying to have a very lightweight process because we're such a young company and we need to be agile and have flexibility to pivot. But at the same time, hearing that voice of the customer is so critical. And it's made some very major changes to things that we had initially planned to do in product that we actually shifted to do something quite different.
So you said something really interesting, listening to the pain. And many companies go right into figuring out the transaction that they're trying to fix. It's more transactional. It's not necessarily tied to the feeling that the end user or the employee is having. So, how does the company put people's needs as the focal point of your mission? What are some of the EQ tools you've used to be effective in really hearing out or bringing people to safely open up about what the pain is?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we've done is first and foremost being super targeted about who we're going after. As a startup, there's the vision of what we want to be, and then there's who we're focusing on. And we're really clear that our key buyer that we're going after right now is the chief marketing officer. And so those interviews with the chief marketing officer and understanding the frustrations they have going into executive team meetings or the challenges they have in front of the board or the fact that they have the shortest tenure of anyone on the C-level. And our focus is not just about giving them features and functions to provide data. It's about how do we actually build a relationship for them where they can actually grow closer to the chief revenue officer, closer to the CFO, closer to the CEO, so that that bond extends their tenure and extends the value so that people see how marketing is driving growth. So, in terms of the focus there, it still has been very much through interviews. And I think in terms of tooling, we'll probably get more mature about that as we get bigger. But because we're such a young company, it's been a lot about that continuous bond of dialogue with them. And going into different organizations and understanding the different scenarios, talking about the needs of a CMO at Series A and what they need to be doing versus a public company, really, really different problems. So we really segment not only in terms of the persona, but also the type of business and what are the kind of the 12 to 24 month goals that they're focused on, and connecting that to the bigger picture. I don't want Imperative to be a feature that people are buying to solve a tactical problem. We want it to be a strategic platform that people are using to better understand their business, to do all kinds of predictions. And our view is this over time will become the ML-centric place for people to do machine learning on top of this, predictive analytics, without having to get into that whole world of how do I use Jupyter notebooks? How do I build ML operations? How do I train data? Do I need a data scientist? Do I need data engineers? Like, take that off off the table and focus on what marketing people want to do, which is they have their program dollars, they have their plan, they want to focus on driving as much demand and brand equity as possible without having to build infrastructure, without having to manage consultants, without having to manage, data models and things like that. So those dialogues are where we focus on filling that out.
I heard something interesting. You said, acknowledging the challenges that the day in the life of a CMO. I mean, that requires a level of empathy to really get behind their desk and in their shoes to really understand what the challenges are. And in effect, there's departments that they fail, they're not directly reporting to the CMO, but if they fail, it impacts their role, it impacts their success.
Yeah.
So, how have you guys, in terms of aligning to the needs of people, how are you guys tapping into things like empathy? Is that something that you guys have as a conversation piece in how you shape these discussions and interviews with your users?
Yeah, well, and I think one of the key things that has made it easy to tap into that empathy is we've been in those shoes. So I've been a longtime CMO at companies and CPO at companies, and have had to sit in the board meetings kind of talking about marketing success and building that bridge with sales and building the bridge with finance, dealing with in early stage companies, you tend to get sales leaders as your CEO who tend to think of marketing more as the people with nice hair and can throw a good party. And that's not what marketing is, right? So like really struggling through and muddling through that work to say, this is how you build a great marketing practice. And one of those things is you have to be the most insightful person in the business around what's going on, what are the trends, what are the industries, what are the personas, what are the campaigns that are resonating. You have to have that dialogue and vernacular to talk to be successful. And then the other piece is just wanting to build on that to reshape it into how you drive growth. So that's not only my pain, but Jim McHugh, our CEO and my co-founder, he was running the AI business, the AI enterprise business at NVIDIA, and dealing with the same types of things where it's like, how do we actually build this business? Because if you think about NVIDIA as a gaming company, the enterprise business is so much younger. It's like building a startup within this massive company. And then on the technical side, our other co-founder, Paul, had that empathy from living with Salesforce and building that, which is kind of the old world SaaS. It's that big monolithic application and the pain that comes with that. And so he had a lot of passion and vision around what a next generation SaaS platform looked like. So basically what I'm saying is we're all working from our own trauma, which makes it easier to relate to the customers talking with.
It's amazing. I've always believed that an effective CMO focuses on building community, and that is external and internal and all that goes into that. And if they can focus on that, they can be very successful. All right, let's continue. The next question is, what are some of the lessons learned in the process of aligning people's needs and differentiating from competitors? Sometimes you have to deal with the fact that, you understand what's happening and what's going on, but you also have to compete in a marketplace that's hyper competitive. So how do you guys balance that? What are some of the lessons you've learned to balance that out?
This is an interesting one, because think about the world of MarTech, where there's more than 6,000 plus products out there, all focused on different things. And I would argue
it's the craziest Lumascape.
Yes. Yeah.
It's almost as bad as the ad tech space.
Investors have this fear of that space. There's just so much going on there that the moment you mention MarTech, people kind of get kind of trippy on you. We don't even see ourselves as MarTech. We see ourselves as the foundation for RevOps. How do you break down the silos of marketing, sales, finance, others? And this is our road, starting with the CMO, of building towards that unification. But part of it is not just coming up with the product and the features and the story. To me, this is about a market movement. So the way we're thinking about this is looking at it in the context of the evolution of marketing and kind of moving from kind of that gut-based marketing to, the world of lead-based marketing with Marketo and HubSpot and all those that focused on the quantification of things. And that was great, but it focused on leads and individuals while everyone else was focused on sales and opportunities. The next evolution went to ABM, which was like had the right intent. It's like, hey, let's look at this from an account standpoint, but it's complete over rotation. Sales doesn't sell to entire businesses. They sell to buyer groups within that business. So respinning that data to just look at it from an account view is cool, but it's not terribly actionable. So the way we're thinking about this is an evolution of a market evolution. The next piece is revenue marketing. How do you actually build out a marketing strategy that directly connects the work that we're doing to revenue and has a whole set of measurements, theories, kind of thoughts behind it that drive that. And we happen to be a product that's believing in that and trying to actualize that in our platform. But around that community piece, I'd much rather be working with, a lot of CMOs and RevOps teams to build out the standards for what that data model looks like, to build out the visuals that become the things that are the core types of ways that you present things to the board, and truly build a community and a category around that. So our approach is best there.
I love it. I mean, why compete when you can carve out a whole new segment and create a whole new mission? I love it. It's brilliant. Yep. All right, let's continue on. The next question: what lessons has the company learned in the process of creating a mission-driven culture? Because what I'm hearing is when you carve out a whole new segment, it becomes a mission. You're literally educating a whole marketplace on how to better do things. It's the ultimate disruption. So what lessons have you guys learned in the process of doing that? That often is met with a lot of resistance too. Like, well, that's different. It doesn't fit into this box. So what have you guys learned from that experience?
I'd say the lessons are continuous. My lesson for the past 2 weeks has been all about SOC 2 and compliance and cloud. Maybe the 2 weeks before was about HR and PEOs, and every day we're learning. But we're an interesting company because we're a pandemic company. We were actually born out of the pandemic. Paul and Jim, who are the co-founders, have only met through Zoom. Paul's in Canada and Jim's in the US. We all worked at Sun, so I'm sure, they've met in person at some point back then. But in the life of the company, have never been in the same room together, which is bizarre.
Amazing.
And we've grown the company. It's a distributed company, so in the US, Canada, and down in Latin America. And so one of the things that's been really important to us is a regular sense of connection and conversation. So we actually do this thing called Liquid Staff, which is basically through Zoom. It started out weekly. It's now gone to once a month, where you can bring whatever you want. You can bring snacks, drinks, whatever you want. And we just talk about what's going on with the company. So people might have questions about the strategy, and we'll dig in there. People might have questions about culture, and we'll dig in there. And it's just a very fun, light way to talk. And it's funny, this emanated out of something that when Oracle bought Sun, one of the first things that happened was a meeting popped up on everyone in marketing's calendar at Sun called Liquid Staff. And it was basically our place to go and meet up and have drinks and mourn the death of Sun Microsystems as it got absorbed into Oracle. But we kind of carried that over into the culture of Mperativ. The other piece is all the tools we use. I mean, everything is Zoom, Slack. The moment anything feels like it's off track, we're jumping in a huddle and talking together. We're still small enough where it's so easy for someone, in the engineering team to meet with the founder and just ask questions and talk. But I guess the most important thing, and I know I'm dragging this out a bit, but when I really think about the culture of the company, I don't want to have a company that has that old tech world. Is it machismo? Yeah. That I think of when I think of companies. Well, I won't name companies. When I think of big old tech companies, and I've been in cultures where it's okay for a leader to just berate you in front of people, to scream at you, to stuff that's just like, that's not okay. That's not how we want to carry ourselves. People don't want to work for people like that. People want to work for people that they see the passion, they see the emotional intelligence, they see that drive, and they just want to be a part of that because it's fun. They feel like they're getting good experience and they feel respected. And that has to be in the DNA of what this company is.
Brilliant. I think most leaders will be well served to replace driver with caring. That'll get you a lot further these days. All right, the final question today. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do more of? Not what would you do different, what would you do more of?
It's interesting because a lot of the times, the thing that is the biggest lock on moving things forward in Mperativ is just resources, dollars, and time. And we have this vision about what RevOps could be, starting with revenue marketing. And it is so hard to sit day in and day out and know that to build a product, it takes years, right? But to have that vision of what we want to do, and we can only go so fast. I want more people. I want more resources. I want more community to talk about this with, to really delve into this. I want to see a world of marketing data scientists that are helping companies think about models and how to innovate and create and change the revenue marketing world for the better. And so that's where my passion lives. It's one thing to go to board meetings and things like that, but what I love doing is sitting around and talking about those things and thinking about multivariate attribution and new ways of doing it. So more I could dig into innovation and thinking ahead, the more happy and excited I am.
Daniel, it's been great to have you with us. That concludes our design thinking show today. It's very interesting. The common theme that I'm hearing quite often is listening closely, paying attention, asking more questions, empowering people to participate, being open and caring, and having empathy in how you structure what you're solving, and not be afraid to break out of the box, go and create a new category and educate the market. So great lessons. I hope just stay with us as we go off there in just a second. Hope everybody comes back for our 12 o'clock show today. We have a second Dojo Live. That's going to be we're going to talk about AI-powered media mix modeling built for the post-iOS 14 reality. That's a repeat. We had that show. I think it was on Tuesday, but there was some technical issues. We're glad we've resolved those. So come back at 12 o'clock Pacific today for another show with Rob Palumbo, who's the CEO at Outpoint. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again in a little bit. Have a great day.